So the file has been converted from motion capture to keyframe data. You can actually see the keyframes when I select a body part on the main timeline. Some body parts, of course, have more keyframes than others. And now that we've got keyframe data, I'm able to go in and rig up the character. So for this, I'm just wanting to lock down the arms in a set of constraints. So for that, we're going to use a couple of the existing features on the rig. You'll notice there's a couple of objects that I like to use as aligner objects for each of the hands. So I'll come in, make sure I'm back in a wireframe mode, and I'll do a couple of transform matches. So I'll match the transforms of this control object to my IK box on the hand, and I'll also match the rotation of the little control object to the wrist bone. With that being done, I can take the control box, the hand, and position constrain it back to the control, which is right there. We'll take the wrist as well and rotation constrain it back to that same control box. I'll do the same kind of alignment for this tool, the character's left hand. Again, I'll just match up all the transforms to the end effector and then match the rotation to the first bone in the palm. I can then constrain the position of the end effector to the control object and also constrain the orientation of the palm to the same control. So now I've got the gun all set up. If actually I move the gun now, you can see that the hands follow along. If I rotate the gun, same thing. The hands are completely locked down. So what I need to do now is to close the hands around the trigger in the case of the index finger. I'm going to just make sure that the reference model actually has the geometry group set to do not allow select. And this is simply so I can actually grab the bones without grabbing the geometry, and I'll start to close the fingers. Let's just have a look here. Go to display options, I'll go into X-ray shading, and I'll begin to work this a little bit. So we've got the little finger curler. I could actually bring the fingers up a little bit here and curl them in. There we go. That'll work for the trigger finger. And I'll get these other guys posed around the stock just nicely here. I don't really need to worry about keyframes on the fingers because there are no keyframes. The motion capture file did not have any keyframes on the fingers, just on the palm. Okay, almost done with the character's right hand. And then I'll just go and look at setting up the left. So I can use the wrist rotator or my little wrist control object to rotate the palm into a more appropriate position. I can then use the wrist twist to align the twisting of the ulna radii. Remember, I've also got my finger curler here, and I can sort of describe an attitude for the fingers as they rest on the barrel. Okay, that looks okay there. And we'll get the last couple of digits involved. Like so. Alright, so that's actually working pretty well. Now, the only thing that is not working for me is the fact that the main character here his hands are locked down, and I can't actually have the gun follow the position of the hand as the hands come up. So I'm actually going to do one thing. If I actually free the position constraint temporarily, I'll go into the selection menu, to the position constraint, and I'm just going to actually deactivate it momentarily. What you'll get here, and ignore the orientation of the wrist, what you'll get is the hand kind of coming up into position and getting that arc that it describes. And clearly the gun is in the character's hand at this time, but because I have the IK constraints being controlled by the gun, I can't really use the free hand to guide the gun up into place. So I'm going to do a little bit of a cheat here. Again, I've got the constraint turned off just so I can track the path, plotting the path. And for this shot, I'm going to go and grab, say, a null. I'll pose constrain the null to the hand, to the wrist. And I'll change this into something. Let's go with a diamond, something I haven't used yet. And I'll call this the gun movement. And I'll plot out the position of this null in relation to the angle and position of the effector. So if I look under Tools, Plot All Transforms, this null is pose constrained to the effector. So I'll actually be able to capture its movement. So I'll capture all 350 frames. So I'll press OK. So it captures that off. So actually I get the movement aligned with that of the hand. Now I can actually turn the constraint back on. In terms of the end effector of the hand. So this is the effector here that locks the hand onto the gun. So I'll turn that on. And to get this null to be independent, I'm now going to go in and remove the pose constraint. Again, the pose constraint in this case was only to make sure I could get the path of action of the hand being brought up into position to guide the barrel of the gun, the aiming of the gun. And for the rest of this now, so if I move into position around frame 27 where I was initially, I can now take the rifle SRT, this guy right here, and I can pose constrain it with offset to this null I used as my guide. So I'll constraint compensate, pose constrain the rifle SRT to that null. Now what we get is kind of the best of both worlds. I now have the motion capture with my character's hands constrained to the gun, but the gun is actually constrained back to a plotted null that controls the motion of the hand. So the cool thing about working with the reference models now, of course, is that this will all transfer over to each of the reference models. Keep in mind I do have a low-res model at this point. If I had animated on this, so if I save this, for example, as reference models, I'll call it work in progress, animate gun scene. Now at any time I can just jump in and switch references. So in my deltas I've stored some function curves, I've stored some additional properties as well, and some operators. And if we look, I actually have the rifle sitting outside of the reference model. So the reference model in this case is actually being constrained to elements outside of it, and this gun movement null is of course outside of both models. So if I wanted to transition up to a different resolution character, let's say I wanted to switch to the medium res character, I'll click on that resolution, and the character updates automatically, so I'm now dealing with the 10K version, and all that animation gets transferred over as well. Now, there is a process that you need to work with when dealing with the cloth scenes, and it has to do with creating a reference pose in the T-pose and blending into the first frame of your action. And of course, this is something that we looked at with regards to the motor tutorials and the cloth tutorials a little while ago. So I would really recommend going back and looking at those tutorials to figure out how to deal with characters that have cloth as well as motion capture animation on them, or any kind of animation for that matter. As far as the point cache goes now, I'll show you how this point cache can work in combination with what we already have here. So what we do have now is our reference models constrained to another model outside of itself. And again, everything looks really nice as we switch between our different resolutions. Okay, so let's move right along.